Yo, what's up? This is Patrick, and welcome to another video of mine. Today we're going to do the first episode of the book club that I announced last time. We're going to pick one book every month and going to talk about it. So let's talk about it. The way this goes is I'm going to go over the book that I want to review in 3 steps. First, I'm going to give you a little bit of context. I'm going to explain you a little bit of background about the book, maybe a little bit of background why I chose the book to be so important. Then secondly, I give you a quick summary. I try to be quick and concise. Doesn't always work because, I speak quite a lot, to be honest. And finally, I will give you my personal experience with the book. How did I apply it to my own life, and what can you take with you for yourself? Now, let's start with the first book that I'm going to present to you, and it's called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore. That book is quite known in the self-development community because Elliot Hulse, a really known fitness YouTuber, introduced it to a lot of people, just like me. And it's also, it might ring a bell with you because I talked about it just last video about my favorite books in terms of self-development. Now, let me give you a little bit of context about the book itself. So the book is based on Jungian psychology. What does that mean? So Carl Jung was a scholar that was a psychiatrist, a psychoanalyst, and the founder of analytical psychology. He was also working together with Sigmund Freud, which is a pretty known name in the psychology community, because he came up with psychoanalysis and tried to interpret, for instance, dreams of people and figure out what are their underlying desires, what are their wishes. And he talked a lot about the conscious and the unconscious and the never-ending fight between those two forces. There's a lot of overlap with other fields of psychology when it comes to personality. And this book is largely about personality and developing your personality as a young man. In his earlier years, Carl Jung described that life is a never-ending process of individuation, which means that you have a process to become yourself and figure out different parts of your personality, whether they're consciously or unconsciously. You're always going to process that in the midst of your life. And for that, he used archetypes. So he tried to explain different personality traits or different occurrences that he saw throughout history, throughout religious texts, or also like throughout his experiences with clients, to come up with these different archetypes of human beings. Let's go into a quick summary. Now, why is this book so relevant? What it means to be a man has changed over the time. And back then, in more primitive times, it was about being a provider, being a hunter, being someone that can stand out as the alpha male, so to say. Nowadays, the meaning has changed a little bit, and so has the way to become a man also. Nowadays, being a man means being successful, having wife and kids, having a house, being self-sufficient. But also the way we become an adult has changed, specifically in Western societies. Back then, there was more a clear-cut way. There was a initiation rite or like rituals connected to becoming a man. And nowadays, we don't have that anymore. There are no initiation rituals. There are no real father figures in most societies because, quite frankly, marriage has not been valued that much anymore. Therefore, there are more single-parent households, meaning there are also like father figures that lack. Our society is led by boys, the author says, and not by men. And he really tries to distinguish between boy psychology and man psychology. The boy psychology is the undeveloped or underdeveloped and immature, which is quite destructive and can be passive and weak. And the man psychology is more characterized by being active and being creating and sharing with other people. In the book, the author goes on to explain how we go from the man or from the boy to the man psychology. He says that a man who cannot get it together is a man who has probably not had the opportunity to undergo ritual initiation into the deep structures of manhood. What she means is that our personality is fragmented. We have different parts of our personality. And being a man is also fragmented into these different archetypes that you can see: the king, the warrior, the magician, the lover. If we don't go through initiation rites, there's no way that we can put them all together and integrate them in a powerful manner and become to real man. He goes on to explain that the various parts of the personality are going to be split off from each other and will live independent, chaotic lives, which is characterized by what he later on goes to explain: the shadow. The shadow part is the dysfunctional part of the personality trait or the archetype. Now let's go into the structure of the archetypes. I will put in a little graphic that shows you the different archetypes, because they're based in pyramid forms. They're based in pyramid shapes. On the top of the archetype is the archetype in its fullest. So it would be the king in its fullest, or the warrior in its fullest. And on the lower part, on the bottom part of the pyramid, there are the two dysfunctional, bipolar shadow parts of it, or the different forms of it. And it further describes the journey from boy psychology to man psychology. I will leave out the boy psychology a little bit, because I feel that the bread and butter of this book lies in the man psychology part, in the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover, and not in the other parts. Let's talk about the king. What are the qualities of a king? The king possesses the qualities of order, of reasonable and rational patterning, of integration and integrity in a masculine psyche, which means that it stabilizes the chaotic emotion, out of control behaviors. It's about being centered in yourself. It's about stability, something we can compare to in modern psychology with neuroticism. How emotionally stable are you? Again, this is how we can draw parallels between those two archetypes, just as a little example here. The really stable and centered part of your personality rewards, encourages creativity in us and in others. On the dark side is the shadow king, the tyrant and the weakling. The tyrant is someone who exploits other people and is abusive. He's ruthless, merciless, and without feeling when he's pursuing what he thinks is in his own self-interest. However, the tyrant king also is self-destructive. It is not only abusive towards other people, but it can also be quite self-destructive. The tyrant king manifests whenever we feel pushed to the limit, which mostly happens in narcissistic personality disorders, where people think that they're the center of the universe. We feel not only centered in ourselves, but we feel we are the center of attention at all times. In that form, the shadow part of the king is quite sensitive to criticism and also lashes out in rage in response to that criticism. So how can we access the king in its fullest though? We don't want to go into the part of the weakling, the one that can't govern other people, that can't govern their own emotions, being really neurotic. We also don't want to go to the other side of the shadow, to be a tyrant, to abuse others for our own purposes, into the realm of being narcissistic. So the way you can access the king is you want to disidentify your ego from the king. So you want to have a cognitive distance to it. This is something that is spoken about quite often when we talk about killing your ego. Now that we're done with the king, let's enter the warrior, the second archetype. The warrior in his fullness amounts to a total way of life, something that the samurai called a Tao. The Tao is a spiritual or psychological path through life. You're going to see that this kind of terminology shows up in different cultures and different societies and different texts. For instance, now when we talk about the samurai, the warrior has a certain type of aggressiveness to it. Aggressiveness is always understood as something negative, but it also can be quite positive in moving others towards a goal or maybe motivating other people. Those are the people that are very energizing. A good example would be Gary Vaynerchuk, someone who is really vocal in the social media platforms, and it's someone who really is extremely, extremely intense in a way he articulates himself. That would be a good way to show you the aggressiveness of a warrior that's constructive and not destructive. For the warrior, there's only one thing. There's one direction, and that's forward. The warrior is mindful and he can evaluate his circumstances accurately and then adapt himself to the situation. And he's more of a strategist and a tactician. He knows what he wants and he knows how to get it. The shadow warrior on the other side, the parts that we don't want to enter but sometimes happens, those are the sadist and the masochist. Those are two types of different cruelties. They're without passion or with passion. Without passion, there's one example that the author gives where he talks about SS officers that had to raise puppies and later kill them with no signs of feeling. On the other hand, we know that there are signs of aggression that come with passion. The masochists also appear in many professions. Workaholics have this weird passion that drives them forward, that makes them abuse other people, but also abuse themselves, their own bodies, their own energy, their own minds. Now that we covered the warrior, let's go to the magician. The magician is the energy that drives our modern civilization. This is how the authors describe it. He says that the magician is the knower and the master of technology. It's someone who brings forward new innovations and someone who always strives for creating things. The magician in its fullest is the archetype that governs what is called the observing ego. The role of that is to stand back and observe and to monitor behavior either of yourself or of other people. It's like a source of wisdom. So if you're the person that is able to properly sit back and just observe what's going on around you, you're really able to then also come up with an action plan to innovate or change behaviors. The shadow magician is either the manipulator or the denying innocent one. I guess all of us have met that kind of person that is really manipulative. Sometimes really obviously, but sometimes more subtly. Some people are really manipulative in that they know how to speak to people in a certain way and also how to take their emotions and use them against them. That's the way that it manifests itself. The archetype manifests itself in a more dark way. Some people are more innocent ones. Those are the ones that manipulate us in different ways. They don't do it really blatantly or obviously, but they more do it by showing their own emotions, maybe by excessive crying or trying to put themselves in the center. Now let's enter the last archetype, the lover. The lover is someone that is really sensual, someone who's more playful, but also someone who, what they describe as someone who can see the world in a grain of sand. He enjoys aesthetics, but he also enjoys having relationships with different people. That is the more playful part of our personality. And what it means to see the world in a grain of sand is exactly that. Seeing the world as it is for its beauty. The problem comes when we enter the shadow lover, the addicted and the impotent lover. The shadow lover is someone who's lost. He might try to find himself in relationships with other people. I think this is a pretty common example of what we can see in our everyday life. Sometimes we see people that jump into new relationships pretty quickly. They go from one relationship to the other, and it feels like they haven't found themselves. They're kind of lost in this world, and they don't know what to do with themselves. Instead of just going on this journey of finding themselves, they just jump into other people and let those relationships define themselves. That is what it means to be a shadow lover. Specifically, the addicted lover is someone who's not only addicted to relationships and the approval of other people, but it's also someone who enjoys life maybe a little bit too much. Let's take someone like Charlie Sheen as an example, someone we all know. It's someone who enjoys having relations with women. It's someone who enjoys consuming drugs. It's someone who enjoys gambling, someone who enjoys all of the pleasures of life. But it goes to a point where his life becomes dysfunctional because of that. He's addicted to that next hit. Then on the other hand, there's the impotent lover. Someone who's really flat, someone who can't enjoy themselves at all. Something you might see in people that are depressed. People that are depressed most of the time seem like really flattened out, as if nothing really matters, a little bit mellow. They don't feel pleasure in things that they used to feel pleasure in. This is the exact opposite of that. So again, those are the two shadow forms of the lover. We want to access the lover to its fullest. The lover at its fullest energizes, humanizes, and gives purpose and love to all of these other archetypes. So it is really important to always keep those in balance. Finally, let's go on a little bit of like a personal experience side of things, a little anecdote, a little story time maybe. I found this book over Elliot Hulse, like I said before, and I think I was around 18, 17, so the perfect time for me to pick up a book like that. Because I was just myself really lost. I didn't have a father figure in my life that was teaching me those different things that are important to get along as a human being. And I also didn't have a initiation ritual because, well, I'm from Germany originally, so it was just I turned 18 and there you go, you're a man now. So I was quite overwhelmed at one point. I didn't know how to handle these different parts of my life. I didn't have a direction that I want to go in. I didn't know what my career would look like. I didn't know what I'm passionate about. I also didn't know really how to, quite frankly, socialize with people. I knew a way to socialize with people, but it was not the best. It was not the best relationships. They were not stable. It was not really supportive always. And I lacked in all of these aspects, basically. The only thing that I had really going for myself at that point was that I was a true warrior. I was someone who was dedicated and someone who would just shut off everybody else and just go for what he wants. Without direction, though, it's pretty, let's say, useless to have a warrior personality because, yeah, you can go and try to achieve a lot of things, but if it doesn't go anywhere that you want it to go, there's no need in it. If you can't balance it out with meaningful relationship, it doesn't mean anything. So I realized really soon that I have to work on the king, the magician, and the lover. And I also felt that in some of these aspects, I fell into the shadow sides of things. So for me, it was a good, let's call it a compass or a North Star, something that gave me orientation to work towards. And I still, to this day, come back to this book and think, okay, what part do I have to improve? Where am I lacking? What can I do? What actions can I take to become better in those 4 archetypes? And how can I integrate them together to become even better? Now, lastly, if you like that video, make sure to drop it a like. It helps me out way more than you think. It's not only satisfaction on my side, it also just gives me more awareness to other people. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and comment and share and help your boy out. Come on. All right. Gonna see all you guys in the next video, but until then, peace out.